back, folks, to the WP-Tonic Friday Roundtable Show. Every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, we have a roundtable, and we normally have an interesting conversation about this week's WordPress topics that we've found or stuff that we've found on the internet that involves technology. And we got a great panel. Probably have hopefully some people join the show, but I'm going to let the panel introduce themselves. And firstly, let's start with Chris. Would you like to introduce yourself, Chris?
Sure. I'm Chris from Lifter LMS, which is a WordPress solution for creating, selling, and protecting online courses. I also have a podcast for course creators called LMS Cast.
That's great. Morten, would you like to introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners?
Hello, I'm Morten. I'm a senior
citizen.
My brain has stopped working today. It's horrible. I'm in the middle of recording a course. My brain is in somewhere else. I'm a senior staff instructor with LinkedIn Learning and lynda.com, and I'm in the middle of recording a course, so my brain has stopped working, and I repeat myself.
Yeah, mine stopped a long time ago as well. John, would you like to introduce yourself quickly?
Yep, my name is John Locke, and I do SEO for manufacturing and industrial companies.
Certainly do. And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're a support company for WordPress with an emphasis on learning management systems, membership. If you're into that thing and you're looking for a trusted partner, WP-Tonic should be the tonic. And before we go into the show, I just want to talk about one of our sponsors, and that's Kinsta Hosting. And we use Kinsta Hosting ourselves for the WP-Tonic website and for a number of our client websites. And we find them fantastic. Got all the bells and whistles, staging site, analytical data, up-to-date technologies, PHP 7.2 if you want it, everything. And they're big enough to have all the resources, but still small enough to really care. And I can't recommend them more than that. And if you're interested, go to the WP-Tonic website. There's banners, links to Kinsta. They are affiliate links, and you'll be helping the show if you sign up for a plan yourself or for one of your clients. And I can guarantee you're going to be really happy with that decision. Into the show, folks. First story. To free up resources, WordPress org plugin review team begins closing unused plugins. Who wants to start with that?
Death is a part of life.
Sounds reasonable. Moving on.
Oh, come on, please.
Well, no. Listen to what you just said. Stops close unused plugins. It's like, here's a thing no one uses. We're going to take it away. Instant outrage. Seriously? Of course, that actually makes sense. They take up space and clutter and make it harder for people to find what they actually want. There's no point in having a list of items where it's like, oh, no one uses this. Thanks. And I will also not use this.
Yeah, but there are some it wasn't clear in the article on the Tavern. There are some plugins that perfectly work. And they don't need constant updating. They just kind of work. And,
Isn't unused the...
Oh, yeah, I suppose you got it. Yeah, I suppose I'm having a brain fart and it's unused, isn't it?
Well, I didn't read the article, so I'm just commenting something I didn't.
I did.
Maybe I should read it. Hold on. Give me 1 hour, and then I'll come back and talk about it.
No, it's a very short article, actually.
But unused plugin is one that has been approved for the directory, but no code was uploaded by the developer in 6 months or more. This is a terrible idea. I retract everything I just said. Ignore all the previous statements I just said. This is
I thought you were on the wrong track there.
For all the reasons you mentioned, plus a million more.
Go then, tell us that then.
Well, so if unused, as this says,
You want to
in
be,
the title
look,
article-
let's face it, Morton, you want to be back in Hawaii, don't you?
Yeah. Okay. So if unused is what it says in the title article, which is not, that unused means people are not using it, then there's no reason for having the plugin in the plugin directory. However, if unused means that no one has updated the plugin for more than in the last 6 months, that's not a good stat for any kind of stability or anything else. There's a ton of plugins that have not been updated in the last 6 months, including things like the developer plugin from Automatic, which is just a shell that lets you install other plugins. I don't think that's been updated for the last 2 or 3 years, and a bunch of other things. That said, I'm assuming that the people who are going to knock these plugins off will also be monitoring and probably just knocking off the ones that haven't been updated for the last 10 years or something like that.
So. Yes, I hope so. What do you reckon, Chris?
I think hasn't been updated in X number of years is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is an issue in the space, as well as plugins that aren't useful, and then as well as plugins that aren't supported, where there's no active support. So there's those I think are the 3 main challenges of the repo, and cleanup is important, and decision fatigue is tough when people go in and there's too many options. So I think it absolutely makes sense to clear it out. It needs to be an all or nothing type of thing, though. They need to really commit to that plan, and not just, otherwise they'll be like, some people might get upset or whatever. But I think overall it's just a good idea.
Yeah. What do you reckon, John?
Oh, well, there's 2 things that stood out. One, and these are both in the comments section, I believe. One was saying that a lot of people use the plugin review team as basically a free security inspection, and that rubs some people the wrong way. And then the other thing was somebody was making an argument, I think it was for one of these thumbnail regeneration things. They're saying it still works, so never touch your running system. So, yeah. But I mean, as a user, I like, if I see like hasn't been updated in 5 years, I'm not touching that. So there you go.
That's a bit too far, isn't it? That's a bridge too far, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
I'm the same, but yeah, I suppose really the detail will be in the detail in a way. It depends how they
Devil's in the details.
Oh yeah, the devil's in the detail, isn't it? I suppose it really just depends on how they actually do this, doesn't it? If it's done in a really heavy way,
just kick them all out and start from scratch.
Let's kick them all out. That's what I say. Let's kick them out. All right, I think
kick out the jams.
Well, we discussed this before, and like I say, yeah, the reason why I've put it as number 1 is there's been ongoing changes from the themes to the plugins. They're really showing, strain here a little bit about how to deal with all this. But like I said in previous shows, I'm not going to repeat it, but like I said in previous shows, I just don't think they're dealing with the fundamental problem, which is a much bigger problem about how the theme and the plugin dispositories and that actually directories, wherever you want to go, actually work. Because I think these are just signs that the fundamental structure of it doesn't work in a way. But on the other hand, it did work because it helped build WordPress to what it is. So there's a bit of a contradiction. But that's life, isn't it? On to the
contradiction. It did work. Now WordPress is too big. You need to scale appropriately for maturity.
Yeah, thank you for that. I thought I was waffling there. Well, I wasn't, was I?
No.
Right, on to the next story. Because I don't want to bore the panel. I think they were getting a little bit tedious with that one. So on to the next. Right, it's like a playfield, folks. I can tell by their faces when they're getting bored. So on to the next one. Google's selfish ledger is upsetting vision of Silicon Valley's social engineering. Before I throw this to the panel, I just want to say I watched the video, and it was I don't think he's working directly for Google now. I did a quick search on his name, and he's working for a kind of sub company. I think Google owns a bit of it or whatever. It's by a geezer called Nick Foster, and I just want to give a quick description to the listeners, viewers. They made this, Nick, made this video, and it sort of Technically, I'm very impressed with the video. The actual ideas in it, Nick, are just freaking shit, mate. Whatever.
Tell us how you really feel.
Whatever freaking stuff you're taking, Nick, and if any of your Google people are sharing it, can I have some of it? Because I don't know what, it was one of the most creepiest bits of crap I've watched in a long while, Nick. On to, what did you think, Morton?
So, ignore this video for a second.
Can you?
No, just ignore this video for a second. So, what we do when we design things and develop things and mess around with interfaces and interaction design and everything else is try to model people's behavior so that they do the things we want. I mean, our friend down here in the left-hand corner of my screen, who's named after a famous philosopher, his job is to figure out how to mess with search engines so that the search engines display information in front of the right people at the right time, so they are swayed into purchasing manufacturing products from one company as opposed to another. Our entire industry is built on the foundation of manipulating people into doing what we want. I mean, all these articles and WordCamp talks and everything that we talk about how to, like, what is it called when you're converting visitors into clients, like all that shit, literal manipulation of human beings. This is not something that Google has suddenly started doing. This is something our entire industry does as default. The industry is based on actual using science to manipulate the behavior of people at every level. So if we're going to criticize this, we need to criticize ourselves too, because this is what we do, right? You put this video onto Facebook because you know that Facebook will actively promote this video to all your friends. You don't put it on Facebook because Facebook is a good place to host video, right? So if we're going to be critical about this, we need to be critical about the entire infrastructure that makes this possible.
I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt slightly. I don't really follow that, really, because...
You don't?
No, because
that's sad. Because it's
true. I'm a sad person, so there we are.
True. Like, this is not like something I'm making up. This is just a provable fact. We create interfaces and designs, and we structure our data specifically to get people to do what we want. That's the entire purpose of any kind of marketing on the internet, any kind of sales on the internet, any kind of sales in general, but much more on the internet than anywhere else. I mean, we're skewing our entire behaviors towards fitting the platforms that manipulate people the best.
Yeah, so I'm just setting.
I'm just setting the stage for this conversation. So this video specifically is an interesting idea because all these big companies make these videos every once in a while where they try to package what they are thinking about into something that is easy to understand. Not necessarily to say, this is what we are going to do, but to say, this is something we need to think about. And when you watch this video, you can think about it in two ways. Either it's a video that showcases Google's intent, or it's a video showcasing what Google engineers think might happen if we go in a certain direction, right? It's the same as that the Biz article that was released a couple of months ago, where they were talking about how Facebook, or Twitter or Facebook, I forget which one of them, was saying that our goal is to actually change the way people behave. I think it was Facebook, and it's exactly the same thing, right? So all these big companies, they constantly grapple with this notion that what they're trying to do is basically try to get people to do certain things and then ask questions, can we then use this power to guide people in a certain direction? And that's where it gets super disturbing, because they're openly admitting that what they're doing is manipulating people's behavior. And then they say, what if we do this for good? And then you have to ask, who decides what's good? Do you decide what's good? Because you're a big ass corporation that earns money. So good to you would be defined as anything that furthers your particular interests in politics, in socioeconomic situations, in cash, and everything else. And that's where everything falls apart.
I'm only interested in one thing, Google.
What's important?
What a load of crap.
What's important about this is another instance of one of these big corporations openly admitting that what they are doing is manipulating people's behavior. And
There's
this
a
is
little bit more
another opportunity.
that, wouldn't it? You know,
Well, it's an opportunity for us.
Genetic genome of the world population.
Welcome to CNN debate show number 85, where people scream at each other. The important part about this, apart from like, you know, we can see the insides of how Google thinks about this stuff, is it once again shines a light on our industry and our industry's need for proper ethics, because we do things that if in a research situation, the things we do online would never be allowed. We do things constantly that you would never get approval for. A lot of the things that we do as experiments or the content that we ship in our websites, if you did it in a research setting, you would lose your funding and probably get fired from whatever university you were working at. You would lose your PhD over it. So we need to start thinking carefully about how we're actually impacting the people we work with. Like that Google Duplex thing that you talked about last week. If you tried to get that past an ethics board at a university, they'd be like, oh, it's too bad you don't want to be at this university anymore and no other university ever. And you don't really want to do research. That's fine. We're just going to put you on this list of crazy people who should never be allowed to do research anymore. Right? But since we're in tech, we are allowed to do this? No. This just shines a light on an industry-wide huge problem, and if we pretend that we're not part of this problem, we're just pulling the wool over our own ears and running around and hurting people.
Yeah, there's some bits, right. There's some bits I agree with what you've just said, but there's some bits I fundamentally disagree with. But I want to go to Chris first because I think the listeners are interested in the panel role, and then I'll come back with my spiel. So, Chris, what do you reckon? You reckon Google really jumped the shark in a big way? What do you reckon?
No, I'm not surprised. First of all, I just want to say that I think one of the trends that this article highlights is, this is somewhat unrelated, but high production value content. That was a very nice piece of content to engage with. And I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that.
And the message was pretty ugly, though, wasn't it?
But Morton's made all the great points.
That was the creepy bit. The message was really not very attractive at all. Sweet noise and nice graphics, wasn't it?
Morton's call for ethics in tech is definitely spot on, and everybody should check out his recent article on that. But on another note, I do find the value of learning from nature and things like epigenetics. And, there's a whole science called biomimicry where we develop technology based on processes that are happening in natural systems. And if you really think about it, there's a big case for the human microbiome. All the bacteria and creepy crawlies inside of us are actually running the show. Like, if you think about it, they're like, we're just the host. And, we move around, we feed them, we spread them. So this is not a new idea, and I just find that interesting. And I've actually done a lot of studying of genetics myself when I look at kind of designing like learning software and how like genes are transmitted. I totally get it, and I understand where they're coming from. And I think it's really important for an organization to have a skunkworks type thing where they're kind of pushing the boundaries. There does need to be an ethics person on the team, though, and I also just want to highlight that, if they're just directionally showing what they're interested in, I think science fiction is a great way to explore possibilities. But let's do the full story and see if the Cylons end up taking over, and maybe we shouldn't go down that path. And just think about what are the odds that this path might contribute towards a dystopia or an extinction of the human race? I don't know. But I just think science fiction is cool, and I understand why they're going that way, and I think it has potential, but we need more ethics.
It's got potential, all right. Before I put it over to John, I just want to quickly put a couple of thoughts. Basically, Facebook has got a lot of criticism lately. I think Facebook are more honest. All that Facebook care is making loads of money. That's all they care about. This Google thing is, it was touched upon in some interviews about some people that really know some of the core people in Google. And they want to see that they came from academia. They came from Stanford, that they're cut above Facebook or people like that, you know. But what they really are is a glorified marketing company, you know, that has been allowed to, you know, become a kind of monopoly, really, that makes tons of money. But they want to see themselves as a cut above that. They want to see them back in Stanford as researchers, not as money-grabbing marketers, which they are. That's the problem. It's like hubris, the worst kind of hubris. And what I really find really concerning, and I think it's because I'm a European, a bit like Morton, you know, because I've been to Auschwitz. See, I've actually been there. I've actually seen where this kind of crap leads to, and if you've ever read anything about the East German security service, the Stasi, and how they, you know, what Google, the naivety and the stupidity, just shows you that you can get really, really very clever people in one area, and they can be the most dumbass idiots in another. And you know, I can think of no system that the Stasi would have loved to have had than what Google is suggesting. You know, the utter naivety of this video and the ideas expressed in it is amazing. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, definitely. So to catch the listeners up on what this was, the Selfish Ledger, this is a 9-minute video that was made by Google X, which is kind of like their big ideas division. And the setup is they talk about Lamarckian epigenetics, and Jean-Baptiste Lamarck was a predecessor of Charles Darwin. And one of the theories that he had was that when you're talking about passing genetics like on from generation to generation, the genetics, it wasn't so much about the species, but it was the gene did what was best for the gene instead of just the species. But another idea that was put forward here is that the experiences that you go through are passed down to the descendants as well. It's not just your genetic code. So those things that you go through are also passed down. So taking that idea, Google talks about this thing called a ledger, which in this case is all the data that is collected by your phone, and I'm assuming like all the rest of your devices, because let's face it, in 10 short years, every human on Earth has got a phone that's collecting data, and we can't think of it. We think of like phones as like an indispensable object we have to have. And you even hear, you know, some marketers like Gary Vee talks about, you know, in 10 years, it's going to be like Cybertron, where we, the phones are like connected like into our bodies and we're cyborgs. So the whole idea, then they take it like the next step in this video. And basically, if you've ever seen that like movie, Her, imagine like your OS is not like your virtual girlfriend, but now it's basically like telling you what to do. And it shows a guy holding a phone, and it's like, help me to either eat more healthily, protect the environment, or support local businesses. And then you tap that, and then from that moment forward, like all the things that they suggest to you are toward that mission. So whatever you choose, it's basically like feeding you that way. So on this level, it's really like behavior modification. And then they're taking it a step further, saying like that ledger is like the gene that Lamarck talked about. And your experiences that are, you know, basically all your data collection that's in your phone should be passed down to future generations for the betterment of the, you know, the ledger or the society for future humans. So what this basically is long-term behavior modification of the human race based on like data that's collected through phones. So as you can see, you know, the behavior manipulation that is through social media and through, you know, advertising and all these different means becomes exponentially more, you know, critical if an idea like this like comes to pass, because now your phones are basically guiding you to like down a path, you know. So that's basically the video in a nutshell.
So one important part of this is you have to realize this already happens. The difference is right now it's being guided solely by the interests of the corporations that run it. So what they are, I think this video, which is from a couple of years ago, what this video is trying to suggest, because if you look at what this video is and where it came from and everything, it's an internal video that was that was shared inside of Google, most likely to get people to start talking about these things. One of the important aspects that this video brings up is this concept of we are already doing this in a very wishy-washy kind of laissez-faire way, where we're just focusing on like, how do we get people to our platform, and how do we, once we have them at our platform, get them to do things that earn us money. And then they say, what if we had some of that control over to the user and say that, hey, you can use the same technology we're using to earn money to somehow further a goal. And then can we do that on a user level? How do we specify how that works? And then can we do it at a global level to actually skew people's behavior in a certain direction? Now, it's interesting because this video is from 2016. Now in 2018, everyone is talking about how social media basically skews people's political beliefs and led to a bunch of interesting things happening in US politics and in politics in other countries as well. This is Google admitting that that happens and saying that, hey, we have this power and we need to do something about it, which contrasts to Facebook, who explicitly says they don't do this, which is bullshit, but whatever. They keep saying that this is not possible, that they don't do this. So it's an important piece of a larger conversation. Problem is, we're not having that conversation, because if we have that conversation, all of us also need to admit that we're doing this as well, right? So this comes down to, is every single person who works on the web and every single person who makes tools on the web and shares information on the web going to start looking inwards and saying, what am I doing to the people that I'm sharing this information to? Unless we do that, we can't really criticize the larger companies who just do the same thing. So we need like reckoning in the entire industry to refocus our efforts and try to think carefully about what we're doing. Because we basically collectively built a machine that manipulates society, and we've let that machine run free and do whatever it wants. So this genetic machine has just developed a system of advertising and clickbait content and everything that just then generates behavior that feeds the machine, right? So we've made a little pretty hate machine. Now we need to figure out how to make that pretty hate machine do good things. I don't think this thing that Google came up with is the solution. I think it's the first part of a larger conversation. Like Chris said, this is science fiction telling you where the path leads if we don't intervene.
All right, we have to continue this discussion at some stage, because, yeah, well, I just don't agree with some of the things you said there, really. But we're going to go for our break, folks. When we come back, we've got some other great stories. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back. I've had a go at Google, my favourite company in the USA. God, I'm finished, you know. God knows what they're going to do with my genetics. God, scramble them and fry them, probably. Right, on to the next story. An interview on This Week in Startups. The Brave browser founder, Brendan, how do you pronounce it? Eich?
Eich.
Brendan Eich. Thank you, panel. Basically, he was in the early days of the browser wars. He started this company called Brave, and they got their own browser, and it's really, really fantastic. I've been using it for a while. I use it on sites that normally you cannot use because it's got so many banners, tracking pixels, that it slows your whole, and it just removes all that crap. And the other interesting bit is they got a payment using cryptocurrency, and they I think they published their own cryptocurrency, and they giving it to so many people, and you can pay publishers with this. It's got some interesting aspects to the interview and what Brave is up to. Anybody want to jump in and start off the conversation about this?
I'll just say that to tie it into the last article that we discussed, you're trying to turn off pop-ups and annoying advertising. So if the ledger is so good that, like, you know, it actually changes your behavior, that it's like, what marketing do we want? And maybe it's almost like if it gets more effective, is that a bad thing? I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there. It's definitely an interesting angle, because people do get annoyed at pop-ups and stuff if they're not relevant. But what if they are relevant and are in the direction of what your desires and pains are? Relevancy is advertising isn't bad when it's relevant and wanted. So, but I think it is cool. I hear a lot of people just give up on an advertising medium entirely. Like, I don't read the paper anymore. I don't read magazines anymore. I just say I use Brave to not display advertising, or I have this ad blocker. I just give up, or I don't watch the news anymore. It's just interesting to watch it, how we evolve in that way. But definitely having an advertising free experience, there's a time and a place for that.
Well, it's like I go to some UK website, newspaper websites. One, the Daily Mail. I'm ashamed to say that I do go to it, because they've got a very good science section, actually.
No.
They have the financial science sections are quite good. It's just the main part of it that's crap.
I read New York Daily Post for political information. What the hell are you talking about? Daily Mail.
Right, the Daily Mail. So I go to the Daily, and it's unusable because, you know, they are the cockroaches which they are. You know, so it's unusable, their website. But using Brave, it's a nice experience. What do you reckon, Morton?
Well, Brave is a great idea. I mean, just for the fact that there's a new browser in the market that's thinking differently is interesting, because right now we're stuck with 4, right? So, well, 4 plus half. So we have Edge, which is the core browser in Windows. We have Safari, which is a core browser in Mac. And then we have Chrome and Firefox, who keep competing about who is the best browser. And then we have Opera on the side, which is actually very good, but no one uses. Brave is might actually become the 5th leg on that monster, and might have influence, mainly because of who's backing Brave, because it's Brendan Eich and all these other people. So it's not, it comes from the web standards community. It doesn't come from a big corporation. As for what Brave is doing, blocking ads and incorporating crypto and all this stuff, some of it, I mean, I think this ad blocking thing is going to become something that is in all browsers by default. It's only a matter of time. So they're just ahead of the game, and they're pushing a bit. I think trying to think of new models for monetizing content on the internet is very important. And something along the lines of paying for the content you actually look at is going to be the new model. But the way that we're currently doing it, so irrespective of browsers, where you go and pay individual publishers, it just becomes unmanageable, because there's so many different publishers in so many different markets. So some sort of incorporated system that handles everything will work, but it will only work if it goes across all browsers. And that's the key here. Like, this is just another step on the browser wars, where you get a solution that's baked into one browser. It will then be, you use this browser to do everything, or you have to like kind of bail on everything, right? So unless we figure out a system that either is or can be adopted by all the browsers, so you get a cohesive experience across the different spaces you're in, none of this will actually work long term, and it won't be as transformative as we want it to be. So it remains to be seen. But you know, if you're a web developer and you're currently developing websites, you need to have Brave installed so you can test your sites on Brave as well. It's just from a purely technical perspective. This is now a thing people use, so you need to use it as well. Yeah,
thanks for that. I think you're spot on there. But it was interesting. It's really ambitious, and then they got this fundamental payment problem that led to this idea of free, which in no way is free. And because of who he is and the backers, he's got some real credibility, hasn't he? But is it this payment what they're trying to do? But like you say, it can't really work really just in one browser. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, I think it's the way of the future. I think as you know, and you know, our friends over at 10up, I mean, they deal with this all the time because, you know, a lot of the people that they solve problems for are media. And I think there's a lot of issues, you know, with just ads and pop-ups and interstitials and stuff like that as a monetization model. I think eventually all browsers are going to, you know, block ads. People really, you know, categorically don't click on them anyway. So I think this is the first of like many innovations that will eventually sweep across all browsers. But I think it's forcing a lot of businesses to, you know, maybe rethink monetization models. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think I'm not against advertising. Some people, I think we're all different, and I think some people are about. It's like when they get an email out and they can't remember what they subscribe and they get angry. And it's got unsubscribe at the bottom and you just can unsubscribe it and that's the end of it. It doesn't bother me. And it's the same with advertising. It's how much, you know, because there's some websites that you go to that are just unusable on mobile or even on a desktop. They are totally... Is there nobody in these organisations doing any testing and saying, I think we've overdone it a bit here, guys, you know, because the website is unusable.
Well, they just read all the marketing blogs and they say, you need to use this pop-up and this like blocker and this thing and this thing. And then they just put all of it in because they want to see what sticks, right? So they want to throw everything at it to earn money and then everything falls apart.
You know, they're unusable. You know, I won't name them, but there's a whole, and they're normally big websites in media, and they are totally unusable. And but it's like it's a bit. I'm not going to go back to Google really, but is there nobody in a large organisation, because they're not stupid. I can understand a small group of really people that are blind to the obvious, but there's nobody any adults in charge and say, you know, publishing a video. And I know it's only a little 2 years ago, and it's only a little kind of view into Google. But if that's the kind of crap they're talking about on a consistent basis, is a little bit, well, all right, I'm waffling. On to the next story. The do's and don'ts for hosting WordPress membership sites, and I should have put this after the Google, really, should I? This is from Kingston, one of my people that support the show, but it's one of their great articles again, and I thought it was really good because it kind of really spotlights, you know, obviously they're promoting their marketing, their services. But it had good information, and it was from somebody that comes on the site, on the show occasionally. And it's really, really well written. And John, do you want to start off with this? What did you think of this article?
Yeah, definitely. So, and as everybody on the panel knows, you know, membership sites have their own unique challenges, and a lot of the things that they're laying out here are just spelling out for people who are getting into this. You know, you can't just use any old hosting or just, you know, $5 hosting here or there for membership sites, because you have stuff that can't be cached. You have concurrent visitors. You might have complex database queries, and you're going to store a lot of data about all your different members, and maybe what classes are signed up to, or what forums they're talking in. So It just lays out the case for focusing on getting a host that has those things in mind and is, built for performance and not how many sites they can squash into one server. So,
and there's specific requirements for a membership or a learning management system. You're going to get multiple requests, aren't you, at the same time? And there are specific issues that are in some ways similar to e-commerce or Woo, if you're using WooCommerce, isn't it, John?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah. That's another case where there's a lot of database tables. There's a lot of database queries. You might have a lot of concurrent customers. And so, that has its own unique challenges too. And again, you're not going to want like the $7 a month host because it's just going to drag. So, spending on something like Kinsta, which is built on top of Google Cloud and offers like all these different add-ons like Redis, like Elasticsearch, that's going to be in your best interest. So,
what do you reckon, Chris? Do you have a few discussions, when you get help tickets and they're on like a $3 hosting plan, and what do you say to them?
We have thousands of those discussions because we have a lot of that. Because
you better bookmark this article and send it to them, do you?
I did actually, and just on the marketing front, when I saw that article for what I'm involved with, it was extremely relevant. I copied the URL, I took it over to my Facebook group and recommended it instantly to 3,000 people. That's marketing done right.
You should have put my affiliate link as part of it, Chris. Please, I'm a poor.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a great article, and it's just part of the general hosting problem. There's so much room for innovation around web hosting still, even though managed WordPress exists or whatever.
Do you think so?
Yes, because we have non-technical people, usually like teachers or entrepreneurs that aren't techies, that want to do an online education business. They want to own the platform, so they go to WordPress. But I see people get hung up all the time on SSL certificates.
Funny you say that, Chris, but I know a turnkey solution that can solve their problems, Chris.
Yeah, you've got one. You've got one at WP. Yeah, that's awesome. There's some content marketing done well, by the way.
Yeah,
but yeah, so the LMS, there's a couple metaphors when I'm teaching people about this problem. Is when the website is the business, it's not just a brochure to like represent the business, but it actually is the business. You need to take it seriously. And it's more than just 5 or 10 web pages. It's got a lot going on. It's got users and reporting and all these database queries and everything. And the other thing is there's so much marketing out there that the internet is easy. WordPress is easy. Plugins are easy. Hosting, just get a web hosting account and just buy a domain name and you're good and launch your business. But the reality is like if you were to think in the offline world about building a school or a meetup, you need to invest in it, and you need to take it seriously and not all solutions are created equal. But yeah, overall, I just want to say it was a great article. I am going to be recommending that article a lot because it really sums it up for a very specific type of website builder. I commend Kinsta and the writer of that article.
Well, Brian, he writes really good stuff. Just a busy guy, but he really does write some good stuff, and I thought it was excellent. What do you reckon, Morton? I think this whole thing, you can get your e-commerce or your membership site up on a $3 hosting account. I just don't think it really pans out, does it?
Well, I think this article highlights a common problem with our community in general, which is we've spent the past 10, 15 years telling people they should build their websites on their own. And that simply isn't the case. You should not build your website on your own. Oh, no. Sorry. Let me rephrase that. If you're going to build like a simple blog where you're going to share some story or something else, it's fine. But if you're going to build a membership site or any kind of complex e-commerce solution or anything else, you really need to offload that work onto someone who knows what they're doing. Just like if you need to install a new faucet in your house, you might want to hire a plumber to do it so you don't get leaks everywhere later, because there are all these little intricacies about how you put in hammers inside the water table so it doesn't automatically run backwards, and you make sure that everything has the right angle.
This experience. You know?
Yeah. I have a friend who bought a house where someone had installed the kitchen sink incorrectly. So all the plumbing is wrong, and they have this massive leak, and it's caused not by any of the equipment being broken, but by the equipment being installed incorrectly. And the water leak only showed itself 5 years later, right? So when you build any kind of complex website, you need to hire someone who knows what they're doing for two reasons. One is it's much harder than it looks. Yes, you can install all the plugins yourself. That is like the shiny veneer on top of an enormous amount of things you need to do. More importantly, if you're running a membership website, you have some sort of business model in mind. You want to share information, or you want to create a community, or you want to sell a product or something like that. That is your job. Hire someone else to do the job of building the thing and getting it to work properly. And then you focus on writing the articles and getting the people in and getting the information out there instead. It's worth it. Was it Brian Richards who said he pays someone $75 a month or a year or something like that to cut his lawn? Because the time he would have spent cutting the lawn, he earns more money spending that time doing his job instead. Think about it like that.
Yeah, it's also, and I think you've got a lot of things to consider if you really want this membership site, or and a learning management system is part of a membership site. If you really want this to be successful, I think you've got some bigger fish to think about.
Yeah,
what plugins you're going to install and how you're going to kind of, unless you're totally broke, and then you got to do the best you can. But I think setting up any business without any budget, it's going to be really difficult.
I just want to add, because I've seen it over and over again, the number one objection to this argument is, I'm trying to validate and stuff, so I'm trying to do it as cheap as possible. But what I see happening 9 times out of 10 is when it's time to move it later, they say, gosh, I should, and there's all these problems with like email and sites down, all this stuff when they're doing the migration to a better host or a better plan or whatever. They're like, gosh, I should have started here. And they just waste so much time. So if you're thinking it's better to like spend $30, $40, $50, $100 a month on hosting and focus on your marketing and get your course and your membership launched and get some sales going in. For a lot of people, just one sale covers the cost of the hosting. So just think of it that way.
Yep. And I'm gonna agree with everything that Chris said, because I do a lot of these migrations and email migrations and all these different things. It's so much easier and so much more painless to just set it up right from the get. And think about it, you don't want to spend more on Starbucks per month than you do the hosting for your actual business. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm just going to throw a pro tip out there. Put your email on Google Apps on Gmail. Don't put it on a hosting account. That's another thing.
Either you can use something like but the email side, especially when it comes to membership.
That's another one. The website sending email. Yeah.
Well, this is the biggest really, because that just will not. Well, that will cause you to send a load of support tickets to MemberPress, to Chris's crew, to everybody, and they can't stand them because do not use your hosting provider email. It just does not work with a membership site. It will not work.
I'm going to throw out like just a couple sentences here too, and it ties together something that Morton said and something that Chris said. We've told people that WordPress is easy and you could do it yourself, but you really should not. If you have a limited budget, if you've only got like $100 or $200 to start, what you should do is hire somebody to just sit down with you for an hour and just tell you what you should do. Because if you try and DIY this, you're going to end up with a hot mess, and you don't want that.
Can I be extra?
Oh, yeah.
For a second. If you have $100 to start a business, you shouldn't start a business. You should go find a different job to work for someone else who's running a business in that market already. Build up the necessary funds to build a proper business. Because if it wasn't for WordPress, you would never consider doing this on your own. Running a business online is like 90% not doing your job, but doing a bunch of tech work and outreach and marketing and all these other things, right? The majority of people who come to me and say that they want to start an online business or start an online agency or whatever are actually financially and health-wise, mental health-wise, better off going to work for someone else first and then building up the necessary know-how, the necessary funds, the necessary market to support a business. You would never just go and open a store down the street because you have t-shirts to sell. You would start by selling them
People
through
do.
someone else. And then once that market is big enough, you would open your own store, right? So it's the same thing online. If you're just starting out and you don't have the funds, it behooves you to not start from scratch because it won't get you where you want to go and you'll end up spending your time and your frustration on trying to make it work.
Well, can I just add one more thing? I call it the 5 hats problem. I talk about it a lot. In this, as an online course creator, membership site creator, you have to be an expert, a community builder, a teacher, a technologist, and an entrepreneur. And very rarely does any one person have all those skills. So they either build a team or they outsource. Wearing the technology hat and putting that on, it's fun and you can feel it, and the clock is ticking, time is going by, you're learning the hard way. So just think about all the other things you have to do and where your blind spots are, and you can outsource some of that tech. And where, Jonathan, can they find out about your turnkey thing?
I'll go to the WP-Tonic website. It's at the bottom in the footer area. Done a joint promotion with Adam from WP Crafter and with Chris. And I think it's a great offering and getting some interest in it. We will see where it goes, but I'm for it. And yeah, thanks. But I think the key thing you said, Chris, is community, because I think when somebody's starting a membership site, their main is validation. Is there a need for their course, basically? Is there? And it's quite, it's not iffy. It's quite, as long as you're straight with people and you offer maybe a good discount, is offer some membership of the membership where they're going to get, so you can make sure that what you're offering, there is a demand for your offering. And then the next biggest thing is you're going to have to, you should be doing this beforehand, but you've got to build community, haven't you, Chris? You've got to build fans that are going to talk about you and your course, haven't you?
Absolutely.
You should not be involved with what plugin, because you've got some bigger things to get on with. On to the next thing then, and I'll probably round it up with this last one. How to earn Google feature snippets for mobile, large-scale study. What do you reckon, John?
Yeah, definitely. So this is
what are they, and why should you worry?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good place to start. So featured snippets. If you've ever been in the Googled for something, and sometimes you see like a big, block quote like at the top before the usual, 10 results. That's what we call a featured snippet. There's different ones. Sometimes it's just like a pull quote out of a web page. Sometimes it's got like an image there too. Sometimes it's a list of stuff. It could be like, all kinds of different things. But basically it's any time where it's, just pulling something out of a page and putting it above the rest of the results. And so what this article was talking about, it's they analyzed pages where they had multiple featured snippets for different searches, meaning that the pages were high quality enough to where they different search terms were creating like these featured snippets. And this is something we call like position 0 in Google as well sometimes. So a couple things that they found, like high quality sites, they've got all the things in place, such as easy to read, well organized. They got HTTPS most of the time. I think 83% of the URLs were HTTPS. It's easy to scan, especially on mobile. You're breaking it up a lot with headers and subheaders. So there's like it's almost like outlined with the H1, H2, and all that, like very clearly. And the reading level was an average of like 7th grade reading level, meaning they didn't use a lot of big fancy words that are just meant to baffle and confuse you. There's just easy to understand. And break it up like into, different sections. They said
I say that Chris must have a problem with that because Chris uses some words I don't even know about, but there we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chris.
But definitely, like a mobile experience is one thing that they found. The average Google mobile friendly score was 95 out of 100. And a lot of them had, the URL structure was very clear. They had what some of you might know as like content siloing, meaning they have the URL and then maybe like a subcategory and then category and then the actual URL. But it wasn't like these big, long, like, hard to understand URLs. It was just very clear. Like you could look at the URL, the web address, and understand exactly what you were going to find on that page. So a lot of these were how to, or, the 5 W's and, how, why, which, where, when. Most of them had those sorts of questions. It's answering a question like, how do I this? What is this? When is this? Most of them are like that. And those are the sorts of things that Google's like pulling out and featuring. One thing that I found in my own personal experience, like too, it features snippets, is if you make things like very clear, like if you have a list, then organize it in, with the proper like UL, LI, like markup, like you would mark up a list in just regular HTML, make things like really super clear, and just, look and see too if you're trying to get like a snippet, look at what's above you, see if you can make your page simpler. If you're on page 1, that was another thing that they found too, is most of them are on page 1, and especially in the top 5 positions, that's usually where they're pulling it from. So you're going to have to be on page 1 at the very least to get a rich snippet, not a rich snippet, but a featured snippet most of the time. So, and
why is it important?
Well, you're above all the other, everything. You're basically like at the very top of the page. People are either going to click on it or they're going to, see it. It's bigger than all the rest of them. So your brand name is right there as well, even if they don't click on it, even if they just read it and say, oh, I got the information. That's more, they're seeing your brand name. But like I said, it's at the very top of the page. It's above everything else. So people are going to be more likely to click it than they are to like keep scrolling down, because they are very much like making it bigger. The font is bigger. They're putting it in a box. They're wanting you to look at it. So definitely it's a cherished thing to get if you can get those for certain types of questions. And here's the thing too. Here's how to tell if you have a quality page or a quality site. If you're getting like any type of featured snippet, then Google thinks you're a quality website and a quality page. If you're not getting them, then, maybe Google doesn't. Maybe something on your site needs to come up in quality. But the sites that are getting them, Google does see them as quality sites. So,
hey, John.
Yes.
So for the people watching who go,
yes,
I wonder if I have feature snippets on my site. Is there a way that they can go into some tool to find out if Google indexes this, or do they have to make random searches on Google to see it?
So what I usually do, say, you could probably set it up in something like SEMrush. I know I use like Ahrefs. And so if I was to drop like Morton.com or Pink and Yellow Media in there, and then, just, it'll give you like a bunch of suggested keywords that you're like ranking for, and I'll just drop those in. It'll show you, like, it'll have like a little icon that says this result has a featured snippet. So, and I believe SEMrush is something similar too, but I know a lot of the tools that you pay for like that will tell you, like, if you set up a project against a URL like that. So
Yeah, God, Google decides if you're quality or not.
Oh no! See, this is the interesting part, Jonathan. So you were saying in the beginning of this episode, it's a very nice bookending thing.
Yeah,
So
because I thought about this. I actually
the
put a lot of
evilest
thought to
thing.
this, actually.
And Google is all about making money for itself. And unlike Facebook, who somehow in your mind is not so bad, Google is just pure evil.
They're just honest criminals. They're just honest criminals. They're like,
So-
you know.
So the key to this is, if you listen closely to what John said, he basically listed off good web design practices and web standards as requirements to get this done. And one of the things that's happening is, especially around Google, and I'll explain why in a second, but one of the things that's happening is Google is now actively promoting content that follows good web standards practices, good web performance practices, good user experience practices, by giving them higher ranking on Google, by loading their content faster, and all this kind of stuff. Now, for a web standards geek like myself, and for a web educator, this is really good, because it means that to get listed on Google and to get promoted on Google, you need to write good code. You need to build good websites that are responsive and mobile first and load quickly and everything. So in that respect, Google is actually forwarding web standards in a very real way. Now, this begs the question, why? And the why is actually really easy to figure out. It's because Google benefits from people writing better code. Because if you write better code, it's accessible. And the blind user you serve the most content to is Google's spiders, who can't read your content. So Google has a direct benefit from you following web standards and writing better code. So they are now putting their money where their mouth is and saying, hey, we are actually going to tell people that they will benefit directly from us by following web standards. So even if they have some evil plan to, siphon money out of the internet and pulling money in, the way they're going about it right now actually makes the web a better place. So, it's a really tricky situation.
Well, I think
Screw this, I'm done.
Yeah, I think we lost one of our panelists, but I think he had another prior engagement.
Oh yeah, we're way over time.
Yeah, so we better wrap this up.
Wait. Are we not going to talk about 4.6.9 and GDPR and WordPress?
Next week. Can you join us next week, do you think?
No. This happens right now. This needs.
Oh, go on then.
We can talk about it next week, but just so everyone knows who's watching this, your WordPress site got updated to 4.6.9.
The websites that I manage, my company manage, have not been updated.
Oh, you are a fool. You need to go update those right now.
We are in the process of doing it.
So if you go onto the internet, you'll see a lot of fear and uncertainty and doubt about this new update. When people are like, this should be a major update, it's not a minor update, blah, blah, blah. Or if you have a WordPress site, you may get all these flags on the back end now that say something about GDPR. And you may be like, what the hell happened? Why am I getting this stuff? What is happening is, on May the 25th, I think, the General Data Protection Regulation in Europe goes into effect. And that affects any website that any European at any time visits. So that means technically, if I visit your website, GDPR applies to you, even though I'm in Canada. So basically, any website that runs WordPress needs to have the proper GDPR setups in place. Now, Heather Burns and a bunch of other people have been working for the past 6 months to get this into WordPress core. And this has been shipped like a minor release in WordPress, specifically to get it auto-installed in WordPress sites all over the world. Because even though GDPR is something that happens only in Europe, it affects every single website on the internet unless you've sandboxed your website so that only people outside of Europe and only people who are not Europeans will ever visit it, which is basically no website ever except the one you have on your own computer. So there are people that are going to be like, you shouldn't do this and blah, blah, blah. It actually has to be done. So if you don't have WordPress 4.6.9 on your computer, you need to go get that installed right now. Jonathan left.
Yeah, man, we just ran them off.
He is like, screw this privacy bullshit. I'm leaving right now.
Yeah, no, definitely that, and that's the thing. A lot of people are probably unaware of that are just have a WordPress site, but they're not, in touch with it. But yeah, that's most hosting companies are just gonna update that, like auto update that. That is important. I have seen like some people on the web, and even some people in the WordPress community, they're like, well, I'm not going to do business with Europe anymore because blah blah blah. It's like, okay, that's natural selection. Bye bye.
Yeah, I love, what is it? I love that clout, like the thing that ranked people's popularity based on social media.
Oh yeah, that went away.
They were like, we're end of lifing our service because of GDPR. Because they're like, there's no way we can continue this service no one ever uses anymore once we basically lose out on the entire European market. And there's a bunch of other businesses that are like, we're no longer going to do business in Europe. And you go, okay, unsubscribe to you because you don't care about my privacy. But the only point I want to make today is, if you have a WordPress site, you need to make sure it's updated to have this new GDPR support, because if you don't, people who use your site can come after you. And the GDPR fines are astronomically high, even for a WordPress site. So this is not to be trifled with. There's a reason why this update is being shipped, and it needs to be installed before May 25th, or you might get screwed.
Right. Thank you for that. So we're going to round it up, folks. First of all, Morten, how can people find out more about you?
I'm on the internet. My name is Morten. You can find me at MOR10, Morten, because that's my name. You can also find me on LinkedIn Learning and on LinkedIn.com and on other places under the name Morten, because that's my name.
That's great. And John, how can people find out more about you?
You can find out more about me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com. Be sure to check out my YouTube channel. I'm posting at least once a week, sometimes more. We're hitting it hard for the SEO. And if you have an SEO question, send it into the YouTube channel. We'll answer it. Search Lockdown Designer, John J. Locke. And Jonathan, how did the people get a hold of you?
I'll go to the WP-Tonic website. We've got some great articles on membership learning management systems this month. We've got some more articles coming up. We've got our turnkey offering, partnered with Lifter NMS and Adam from WP Crafter. It's a great offering. So if that's interesting to help you get started on your membership journey, that could be of interest to you. And we'll be back next week where we're going to have another great panel discussion. I've really enjoyed this week's. It's been great.
This one was good. This is a good episode.
Right. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Peace.